and welcome to you on The Law, a brand new program here on QTV. This is the show that brings the law closer to the people, making it understandable, accessible, and relevant to your daily lives. We will explore the rights and responsibilities of a citizen, how the laws are made and applied, and how justice works in the Gambia. We will speak with legal experts about the issues that shape our daily lives under the rule of law, because knowing the law is the first step to protecting our rights. I am Mudumbuj. Today we're going to explore a vital topic, very important topic at the very foundation of our societies, constitutions. What are they? We refer to them as the supreme law of the land. Why? So here to help me unpack this very vital topic, well, who else? The constitutional lawyer, Mr. Lamin J. Dabo. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. I'm happy to be here.
That's it. So, counsel, well, to many of us, constitution sounds sort of distant and a complicated document. I wonder, what exactly is the constitution and why do we need it?
The constitution, in a nutshell, are the rules, the laws that govern how a state should be run. Here we are talking about the Republic of the Gambia. So it is the supreme law. It said that, the 1997 Constitution said that in Section 4, that this Constitution is the supreme law of the Gambia, and any other law that is inconsistent with it is void to the extent of the inconsistency. So you find that in the text of the Constitution itself at Section 4.
That's it. The other part of the question I ask, why do we need it?
Like I said, it's the governing instrument of a country. We would say the institutions, private businesses, they have constitutions. But I guess in this case, we are talking about the national constitution. So it divides it divides authority. One authority divided among the separate arms of government.
That's it.
Yes.
How is it different from ordinary laws passed in Parliament?
Well, ordinary laws are dealing specifically with specific issues. For example, the country would say, okay, we want to pass a law specific to telecommunications. So that would be specific to telecommunications. But the Constitution is the umbrella law. It governs the different branches of the government. It shares powers between them. And if I say the different branches, we start, of course, with the executive arm of government. It's the most pervasive, very influential. And then you have the National Assembly. You also have the judiciary. So these are the three demarcations when it comes to the Constitution.
That's it. We'll get to the structure,
yes,
as it were, later. Different types of constitutions? How many types of constitutions are there?
Well, for constitutions, obviously, you can say just one type. It's just what a particular country decides to be governed by. Yes. So in the Gambia here, of course, we have only one constitution. That is the Constitution of the Republic of the Gambia, 1997. So if you go to the United States, it's the same thing. It's called the U.S. Constitution. There is no written one as such in the United Kingdom, but the governing values that we would have in our Constitution or in the American Constitution are taken and used as a guide in governing the country.
That's it. Yeah. So how does it shape the relationship, as it were, between the government and the people?
That is an aspect of the Constitution also. For example, if you go to Chapter 4, the fundamental freedoms, that is the area of our Constitution that deals specifically between the government and the people. Yeah, what the people can do, what the government can do, what they cannot do. It's all encapsulated there. Of course, it was subject to interpretation. There is nothing hard and fast about it. It's subject to interpretation. So if you disagree, you go to the judicial branch of government. At certain levels, only the Supreme Court has authority to interpret particular provisions of the Constitution.
That's it. So now let's go further into the sort of the structure. What are the main parts or chapters of our Constitution?
Well, the main parts, obviously, as earlier mentioned, would be the section that deals with the executive, how the executive is controlled, and how the executive is permitted to manage the affairs of the country. So that is the executive arm. If you come to the National Assembly, generally people refer to it as the law-making body. But in reality, it makes law in collaboration with the executive arm of government. Because if a law is passed, it would say enacted by the President and the National Assembly, or the National Assembly and the President, so they can do it together. So if you go to the judiciary, of course, that would be the interpretation of the laws. At the top of that judicial arm is the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has the authority to interpret every provision of the Constitution, but it can interpret that alongside other courts, like, for example, Chapter 4, the fundamental freedoms. The Supreme Court does not have exclusive jurisdiction to interpret the Chapter 4. Other courts can as well, say the High Court, even the magistrates' courts, can interpret the Constitution in arriving at their decisions. The reason why the Supreme Court does not have exclusive jurisdiction there is because, the Supreme Court would be looking at the, let us say, the most challenging aspects of the law and the Constitution. So they cannot be bogged down by everyday matters. Yeah, if you like, they are the policy council, the cabinet of the judicial arm of government. So they cannot waste time with everything. Yeah, there are other institutions or other arms of the judiciary doing that.
That's it. But here, we tend to think that constitutions are inherently, as it were, on our side, protecting our rights. But I imagine that you can have sort of liberal constitutions respecting your civic rights and all of that, and illiberal ones.
Yeah.
Other constitutions that wouldn't respect your rights so much. Talk us through between these differences.
Well,
because really, particularly in the context of our 1997 Constitution, there's so much we do not like about it, but it's in the Constitution.
Yeah, but as between the governors and the governed, that is between the state and the people, Chapter 4 is quite comprehensive.
So the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, that is our Bill of Rights, if you like. Yeah. So if there are limitations, those limitations would be because the courts impose limitations on themselves. Because it's clear that if you say right to freedom of expression, that cannot be absolute, certainly. Yes. So if it reaches a particular point, then the courts are going to interpret it not in accordance with your absolutist view, that I can say whatever I want to say, but in line with common sense and reasonableness, given the context of, what happened in particular circumstances. Because if you say 100%, whatever you want to say, you can say, that is not going to make sense. Yeah, that would be anarchy. So obviously, but if you look at that 1997 Constitution, from that perspective, it's fantastic. Even, you know, and they are protected also. They are entrenched provisions of the Constitution. Yeah. So which means that the National Assembly and the President cannot by themselves amend those aspects of the Constitution without going to the people. In other words, if you say, okay, no freedom of speech, then obviously you are going to go to the referendum. You'll have to go to the people and say, you know, we don't want you to have freedom of speech. It will fail. That will fail. It will not go anywhere. So that protection is in the Constitution there. It's very, very significant.
That's it. And just something quickly, in some countries, I think issues of sovereignty would come in here, wouldn't it? Because, for instance, in Britain, once Parliament passes the law, the judiciary doesn't have the right to say it's unconstitutional. Whereas in more legalistic, as it were, constitutions like the US, the Supreme Court does. What exactly do we have here? As it were,
no, in the United Kingdom as well, sovereignty, of course, resides in Parliament. No doubt about that. So Westminster has a lot of power, a lot of authority. But the Supreme Court has the authority to say this particular government conduct is not in line with the law. They may not say it's unconstitutional, but they can say it is not in line with the law. And when that happens, the government has to go to the drawing board. It has to change that particular law. So yes, the US situation is different. Yes, the Supreme Court is massively powerful in the United States. Yeah, okay. But that is good to the extent that it put a lot of restraint on the executive arm of government, because the executive arm is the more rampant arm of government. It is the arm of government that can do a lot of things that are not in line with the law. So somebody has to say, you know, you can't go beyond this point. So be mindful of that.
Setting the limits.
Yes.
Supreme law of the land.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean in practice?
In practice, it means that anything that conflicts with the Constitution is unlawful. As a law, if it conflicts with the Constitution, then that one cannot be tolerated. Yes, our law said that our Constitution said that itself, and like I earlier mentioned in Section 4, that this is the supreme law of the land. That any law that is inconsistent with this Constitution is null and void to the extent of the inconsistency. Yeah.
So what happens if a law or government action goes against the Constitution?
Well, the Supreme Court would say so, and government would have to accept that.
But somebody have to take it to the Supreme Court, or the Supreme Court can initiate action?
No, someone has to take it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can be watching it. It wouldn't say anything, you know, except when somebody says, okay, let's go to the Supreme Court and test this. Yeah, that is the only time the Supreme Court comes in, because you have to have deference between the co-equal branches of government. So if the executive is doing something that is unconstitutional, somebody has to plead that with the Supreme Court. Somebody has to go to the Supreme Court and say, well, I believe you need to intervene here. Government action is unlawful, and we can't do anything about it ourselves. But the only way you can do something about it is to go on the streets, and obviously that is not a solution. So the solution would have to do it in a civilized manner, in a more dignified manner, within the context of national conversation, and the Supreme Court would be leading in that conversation. The different aspect, litigants would of course say, you know, this is our position. The other opposing part would say, this is our position, so the Supreme Court will take a decision. It's what happens even in normal daily legal conflicts. Yeah.
I wonder if any sort of example comes to mind where the court sort of upheld the supremacy of the Constitution over laws or government actions in this country?
Yes. We don't need to go far. Are we not in the Carnifing municipality?
Exactly.
Yes, we are. When the local government and the police intervene in the dispute between the Carnifing Municipal Council, the Carnifing Municipal Council and Senator Martin, obviously the council went to court to say that the government had no authority to forcefully return Senator Martin to act as CEO at the Carnifing municipality. The Supreme Court gave a towering judgment. I mean, you don't have to look at that judgment in the context of the Senator Martin case alone. You have to look at that judgment and try to understand the relationship between the national government, headed by His Excellency President Barrow, and the councils. Is very, very important. Yes, because some people would say whatever the central government wants to do, it can do. In fact, some people would say the government can do anything, or led by the government, the president can do anything. That judgment is one of the landmark judgments as far as the separation of authority between the executive arm of government, that's the national government, and the local authorities. Yeah, because the local authorities under section 193, 194 of the Constitution have a great degree of autonomy within their zone of operations. So obviously, if you intervene, as the government did in the Carnifing municipality, the government would have, the Supreme Court will vacate that. It did without any hesitation. And it was not meant as an affront to the government or a challenge to the government or a disrespect to the government. It was just upholding the law.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So this principle, how would it protect ordinary citizens? And I think you've already answered my next question in that we can challenge them, isn't it, by going to court?
Yes.
So ordinary citizens can challenge unconstitutional laws themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Say, for example, if you are, I can give you a live example. In 2018, the Faraba Banta incidents, Pamodu Bojang was assaulted and the matter was taken to court. It didn't reach the Supreme Court, obviously, because that was a conflict that could be dealt with by the High Court. And the High Court made a decision to say it was unlawful. What happened to him assaulting him when he did nothing wrong was against the law. And the government was ordered to pay $15 million to him. You know, so obviously even individuals can trigger the intervention of the law by taking their disputes, their conflicts, their unhappiness to the court, to the High Court.
I think this brings us to an important point, really, how laws are made and interpreted, and they must align with the Constitution. Can you just briefly tell us how laws are made here?
Well, laws are made, most of the time they originated from the Ministry of Justice. If you want something, or any branch of the government wants something done, you know, it approaches the stakeholders there, and the ministry's legislative drafting section would be instructed by their superiors to draft that law in consultation with the department that is interested in it. They'll go through it, there'll be consultations, and of course it will be taken to the National Assembly as a bill. You know, there it is debated, and ultimately if it is agreed, then it would be agreed, and it would then be approved ultimately by the President, and then enacted by the National Assembly and the President. Then it becomes a law. Sometimes it will be gazetted as to when it comes into effect. Some laws come into effect immediately, or there would be a date scheduled for particular other laws. So it's not like, for example, if it is a law that affects other people immensely, and they needed to give people time to regularize themselves, to get themselves ready for the new law, they can say this comes into effect 3 months from now, 6 months from now. So, yeah. But usually.
That's how it is.
That's how
then
it
we
is.
move on to the interpretation of that law.
Yeah.
That's with the judges.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes with interpretation, you get debates.
Yes.
means that.
Yeah.
How do we sort of ensure that the judges in their decisions would reflect the spirit of the Constitution rather than their personal opinion?
Well, I think most of the time that's what they do. You cannot, in interpreting the spirit, you can say theoretically what you have to do is stay within the law, but how do you, in particular circumstances, separate political philosophy, political viewpoints from the spirit of the law? Because everybody is going to say our interpretation is in line with the spirit of the law. So, as someone as widely read as you are, you probably would be watching how the Supreme Court of the United States act. Sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes it would depend on what side of the political aisle a particular justice, is sitting, or particular justices are sitting when they deal with constitutional matters. There are times when the dispute is so finely balanced, it tilts not necessarily on the absolute truth, but on the philosophy of the majority of the court at that particular time.
That's it. There you remind me of Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Yes.
The inarticulate major premise. That's always that bit.
Absolutely.
We are coming towards the end.
Yeah.
The role of the citizen, really, in being a watchdog. We have the institutions to make sure that the government respects the Constitution. What do you have to say about that?
Well, you go to court every day. Citizens are, pleading their cases before the Supreme Court. They're filing cases before the Supreme Court to say, this and this and this should not happen. Say, for example, if the Carnifing municipality, because there are other cases, they are currently on the docket of the Supreme Court, so we'll leave those alone. But we can deal with the decided ones. Say, for example, if the citizens didn't go to the Supreme Court to say what the government did in the case of Senator Martin was wrong, to forcefully come and break down the doors of the council and install her in an office there, if the complaint was not taken to the Supreme Court, nothing would happen. So citizens should be really active in ensuring that government acts within the law. Now, if you interpret some of the cultural views, people would say nobody fights with the king. So that one is a funny one. We don't have a king here, but we are used to this word mansa, So, but we don't have a king. Yeah, we are governed by a president who is himself answerable and under the laws of the country. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking of that famous anecdote of Benjamin Franklin after he had come out of the Constitutional Convention was 1787.
Yeah.
A woman said to him, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin said, "Well, a republic if you can keep it." Bringing in the value of citizenship, civic engagement in really keeping the Constitution. So this is it towards the end, isn't it?
Yeah.
A Constitution is really as good as the people.
True.
One
Absolutely.
can ignore it. We've seen around how presidents trying to amend constitutions to perpetuate themselves, isn't it? How do we protect ourselves from such abuse in the end? It's just as good as us, isn't it?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, we have to take our responsibility. If we know, and we should know, that there are certain laws that are coming on board which are not in keeping with the republicanism, the limited government that we should make sure exists in this country, limited government within the Republican system. Well, we have to make sure we fight for that. because otherwise, like I said, executive arm is rampant. It does whatever it wants to do, convenience and all that, you know, and sometimes at the end of the day, it's not even good for you, ultimately. But today, it works for you. It moves to a political project. So you don't care about what its impact would be on the citizen tomorrow. But tomorrow you'll be a citizen yourself. So if you have laws that are not in keeping with the rule of law, who knows, after office it can come and haunt you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Finally, I'm just telling you in 1 minute, what final message do you have for Gambians about knowing the Constitution and respecting it?
Well, knowing the Constitution and respecting it, I think we all should know. And obviously the citizens would like to respect it. But the greatest respect to the Constitution, to the law, to legality should come from the government itself. It should not say, we are above the law, we can do whatever we want to do. No, you cannot. If you do that, tomorrow it will come to haunt you. So everybody should take an interest in public affairs generally, but more particularly, reading the Constitution is not very difficult. Understanding its nuances can sometimes be a challenge, but at least a general understanding of what the police can do to you if they encounter you. You know, if you have a conflict with the police, what can they do to you and what can they do to you? Yeah, so if the police say, just a practical example, if police arrest and say, we want you to open your telephone, tell them no. The law does not permit the police to do that. It is a dispute, so that dispute would be resolved by the courts. The courts will order you to open your phone, but the police should not cajole you to open your phone. And they shouldn't be able to force you as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Council Darbo, Jay Darbo, for your time and your insights there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well to our viewers. Until next time, remember that understanding the Constitution is the first step to protecting it. Until next time, I'm Amadou Mbodj. Goodbye.